the way that our deal was set up, it was all stock, but we also couldn't sell the stock and contractually couldn't pledge it. So we couldn't use like options to create like a collar on our value. So we watched it ride all the way up and watched it ride all the way down.
Welcome to the Exited Founder Podcast. In today's episode, Exitwise managing partner Todd Sullivan sits down with Dan Cornell. Dan's a cybersecurity entrepreneur who co-founded Denim Group in 2001, building it into one of the most respected application security firms in the country, earning 3 technology patents and growing to over 100 employees before selling to Coalfire in 2021. But rewind, before that successful exit, Dan had a first one that came with some hard and expensive lessons that we really get into today. That experience shaped everything about how he approached his second exit and why the outcome was so different. At Exitwise, the people in your corner have actually sold their own businesses, and Dan is exactly that. Let's get into it.
Dan, I'm really excited to have you. You've joined our Exited Founder Marketplace, and now you're on the podcast. I'm really excited to hear your stories. You had multiple exits. You've been part of a lot of M&A. And because of that experience, I know you're going to be really helpful to, our fellow founders that are thinking about selling their businesses, particularly in cybersecurity. I know you've had varying experiences too. So why don't we do kind of a quick start, introduce yourself, and let's start with kind of that first M&A experience back in 1999.
Right. Yeah, so Dan Cornell, grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. Now I live in San Antonio, Texas. I've been here for quite a while. And that first exit was a company I'd started with 2 other of my classmates at Trinity University. And I want to say the actual founding is kind of complicated the way all the pieces came together. But working with these folks, and we had an exit pretty soon after we had graduated. So I graduated in May of '98, and the exit was in September of '99. So I'd been working prior to while I was at school and whatnot. What we did is a custom software development that was internet focused. And so a lot of e-commerce development. At the time, it was a lot of design firms that were building websites, but they were like brochureware and didn't really have interactivity, or it was like your ISP would try to like crap something together to make a website. Like we were at an interesting spot where we had all like, computer science degree programmers doing that. And so that gave us the capability to build stuff that was certainly regionally interesting. Maybe if we've been in New York or San Francisco, but we're, in the middle of the country in Texas. And, kind of time went by and we were looking at like a lot of the big projects are going, like nobody got fired for going with IBM, right? Or they're going to Sign or Vine or Razorfish, these big web agencies.
Yep, I remember.
And we had discussions with clients where they're like, hey, we love you guys, we love the price of what you do, we love the quality, but like, you've got you're a 15-person company with like 3 owners, and if like like Dan gets hit by a car and this guy's wife tells him to get a real job, so we're going to go over this way, right? And so we were then approached. We had a company that we partnered with, a design agency that we partnered with a lot, that got acquired, and the acquirer of them, then reached out to us. And I remember talking to the other founder, and he's like, yeah, I still work like 16 hours a day, but like when the day's over, I don't worry anymore. Like when it was my firm, I worried. Now that it's somebody else's problem. And so we ended up talking to those folks, and we were acquired at an all stock transaction, which had its moments when that was a great idea, and had its moments ultimately when it was not a great idea.
Yeah, so I can see how that comes crashing down, right? You were finding business success because of the time too, right? You're getting in the heart of the internet bubble,
right?
And you got a skill set that's in demand. And I understand why somebody would approach you to be acquired, because they just acquired something and you're like a core vendor of theirs, right? There you bring a lot of value. But yeah, all stock deals, right? You're rolling the dice, and the market comes crashing down. So at the time, like you go over, you're continuing to do the work, but you're seeing the value of it. Did you see it just plummet immediately, or was it over time? Like it's got to be a painful thing while you're still giving your heart and soul, right? And seeing the value disintegrate.
Yeah. And so when we were acquired, like the trailing 15-day average of the stock or something like that, which was 8 and 15/16. This was long enough ago that stocks were traded in fractions.
Okay.
And so it was 8 and 15/16, and it rode up to, I remember it being like 94.50. So they had changed also to decimal places at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, I'm 23, 24 years old and looking real smart, to all guys, Jesuit high school up in St. Louis. So I went back for my 5-year reunion, and I was the smartest guy in the room for that. It was like a month or 2 after our deal had closed.
Yep.
All my buddies were calling me .com. It was that was a real heady, fun time.
Yep.
Way up. The way that our deal was set up, it was all stock, but we also couldn't sell the stock and contractually couldn't pledge it. So we couldn't use like options to create like a collar on our value.
Yep.
So we watched it ride all the way up and watched it ride all the way down.
Yep. Yep. You had
And,
the hold
you know,
period.
and again, I want to say I sold my shares in chunks at like 32 cents, 18 cents, and 9 cents. So I was actually rolling capital losses forward from a basis in that original business.
All right. So I think listeners will certainly understand, right? You went through serious pain, education, built and sold a company, and took it on the chin, unfortunately, when it came to the financial liquidity. What can we jump ahead? Tell me what happens over the next period of time, the big company that you built, and then talk to me about how the M&A experience began.
Yeah, and so started my next company, Denim Group, with one of the same founders as with Atension, our original company, a guy named Sheridan Chambers. Picked up a third partner, a guy named John Dickson. Our previous third partner, Tyson Weiss, went on to he did amazing things, started a company called 4Flight that they sold to Boeing. I'm just happy he answers my phone calls these days. He's done real well. But and we started out, like, it was interesting, over the 20 years that business evolved quite a bit, where we started out doing some hosted services stuff, and that wasn't really compelling. We essentially did a lot of like custom software development, the stuff that we'd done before. John Dickson's background was in Air Force information warfare, and he'd worked at in the Air Force and then at KPMG in their information risk management practice. We essentially, in talking to him, he said, like, I see what you guys are doing in the development space, and I see where like the hard problems in security are, and they're really moving above the infrastructure level to be at the code level. Everybody has a resume that looks like mine, right? Which is like Air Force and then KPMG as an auditor, but not as a software developer. And so that really caused us to build that application security practice. We ended up sunsetting the custom development practice. It was just too hard to market and scale. Now, focused on the app security. Over time, we built some e-learning modules for developers. We ended up selling off that asset, and we built a software platform that let organizations manage their programs. So, big banks, telecoms, semiconductor companies that have like thousands of applications that let them manage all the data coming from all the testing and stuff. And so that business changed, it was like 4 different businesses over the course of those 20 years as we kind of understood, what the market looked like, and were able to move into that.
Can I ask you, were you purposefully going after kind of higher value markets, or where you thought you developed a moat? Or, what was the impetus each time to say, I'll call it upskill,
Right.
For lack of a better term?
That's exactly it. Because when we looked at the software development, like custom software development as a practice, it was comparatively low margin, but large chunks, right? Because you could park 5 people on a dev project and you're making some arbitrage with their hours and whatnot. But like I said, that's really hard to segment and market, right? Because you're looking for, well, hey, where's a company that doesn't have a dev team but needs a software thing, but understands how much or how expensive custom software dev can be and all that. And so we had a very conscious understanding that, hey, these app security consulting services are higher value, higher margin, and also for us easier to segment and market, right? Because we could say, like, okay, no, we're going to go into firms that are doing all this software development, and we can work with them to help make that safer for them, right? Similarly, in seeing all these customer environments and understanding the problems that they had to deal with, we saw the real data management challenge these big organizations had in dealing with running their security programs. And that caused us to say, like, oh, hey, if we built some software that did this, where you could take multiple tools and it would normalize and deduplicate the data and stuff like that. And so that was from us being out in the industry and seeing, like, hey, this is a problem that folks running these really big, complicated programs have. That forced us then to learn, like, it's one thing to sell professional services or managed services. It's another thing to sell, what is essentially like SaaS software, right? Or software subscriptions. That's a very different sales motion, like our ABCD, like kind of sales ranking, we're all different. So along the way, we were approached by some bankers, and they came and said, like, hey, we just sold these guys who were one of your big competitors. And we're like, oh, we knew those guys. We had a lot of respect for those folks and whatnot. And they're like, what we want to do is take what we did for them, and now we can just do this for you guys, right? Essentially said, like, hey, we know how to sell a app security services company. And so we brought them on board and spent some time kind of like not cleaning the company up, but kind of getting focused on what we thought buyers were going to want. And we went through a whole process with them, the road show and the slide presentations and all that stuff. And we had Wipro on board, the big Indian offshore firm. And the original plan was that they were going to buy the company. They were going to buy the whole company, right? Both the services and the software platform. Unfortunately, at the time, and this was kind of a like people on the bus, seats on the bus type of a thing, our sales engine was not executing at the time. Like, we had not, you could not give us a number that we couldn't miss. right? You cannot find someone that we could not disappoint from that angle at that particular point in time. And so the Wipro folks, kind of through the process, were like, how about we make a minority investment just to get a feel for how your business works? And
Sure.
instead of being valued like this, maybe the value is like this. And
Yep.
that was a good deal for us at the time, because really it gave us access to some capital that we needed to push on the software platform. But really what it also let us do is it let us take some money off the table, right?
Yep.
Because I had that scarring of
Sure.
used to be the guy. I don't need to be the guy that used to be the guy twice. And for us, it was a way to take some money off the table and see if, hey, does completing this transaction make sense under some time frame or not? And it didn't make a lot of sense. I really enjoyed the people that we worked with at Wipro and whatnot, but just the way that they sell and their brand promise was very different than the way that we went to market, right? And so that made it hard.
Let me interrupt for a second in that those experiences are very, they're poignant. They're going to be super helpful for somebody else that is going through, this journey. When you talk about taking some money off the table and taking on investment, right? So obviously there's a negotiation around, hey, what goes into the business to continue to invest in software and what gets taken off the table. So you have that experience, which is great. Did you have advisors that were helping you through making that decision, or was it just the management team and, partner discussions?
So we had in our contract, essentially a line of credit that we could provide back to the business that was limited, to say you guys can loan up to this much without a board decision or whatever. And so on the broader deal terms, we were working with ourselves and with our investment bankers. So they acted as advisors through the whole transaction. The specific terms of how much can we loan back and whatnot, that was more of the three founders or the three owners, where we knew okay, well, we know what the dip is that it's going to cost to develop this technology, and here's what we think how the sales are going to work to pull us out of it. And so the specifics of kind of how that money moved was something that we really handled internally, but the broader deal terms was obviously our deal attorney and also our
That's
bankers.
great. So the point of my question is you did have kind of professional help.
Yeah, that would have been, we did the first one where our professional help was our attorney, and he, got us such wonderful clauses as, he's like, I changed the wording so that you can be drunk at work as long as it doesn't impact your performance. And I'm like, all right, well, that's something I don't really think I'm ever going to use, but where he didn't weigh in on this is an all stock deal, which means you guys are kind of, and so we didn't have advisors in that case. Honestly, I think going back, our deal looked like a template that they had for other deals. And so with that acquire, if we had said no, we want cash, we want XYZ or whatever, they would have been like, cool, we'll just go find 15 dudes somewhere else to do this. But no, for the transaction with Wipro and Coalfire, our bankers were super helpful, but that specific stuff was things where we knew the business and we knew what investment we thought needed to be made.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack. And I think what jumped out at me, what you just said on the first acquisition, that the buyer has a template. So a lot of buyers do, they have a playbook, right? And you want to fit you, whether it's valuation or structure or actually even kind of post-transaction integration. They know what works for them, and your best advisors, they know what those playbooks are, and they know where to push and pull in order to have you square peg fit in a round hole, right? They know where to push and pull to get you the best deal. So doing that stuff on your own, it can be problematic.
They see a bunch of deals, right? As a founder, I'm fortunate. I've seen a number of different transactions, some good, some bad, but they see a lot of deals, and and that's something also when we did the acquisition, we had inbound interest from the folks at Coalfire, but also from a publicly traded company.
Okay.
And our deal attorney actually had just finished a deal with the publicly traded folks, in a different part of their business, right? And they very much came back, and because they do a lot of M&A work, and so they came to us and they're like, here's what this looks like, and we're like, well, we've got this other offer and it's better, and they're like, well, this is what I can get through the board, is this template that looks like this, and we're like, all right, we're gonna go this other direction.
Let's jump to the actual the transaction, right? You're labeled as cybersecurity company at that point, and you've got this strategic partner, I guess we would call them in. Talk about kind of the full M&A. How does it happen? Are you approached? Is there a moment in time that's the trigger?
So we had inbound interest from those two parties, right? And that came kind of right on the tails of one another. And so we're able to kind of lump those together and then bring in our bankers and be like, okay, we've got this offer. Here you go. You guys start to run this process with these folks and let us know how we fit into it.
Did you already have an agreement signed up with your bankers, or did you say, hey, we're going to hire you right now that we have two offers in hand?
So we used the same bankers that had led the process process that led to the
Yep.
Wipro investment,
Yep.
like we were still working with them.
Under that similar engagement. So the what you would pay in fees was already established, whether you brought the buyers or not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like I need to go back and check, but yeah, I want to say that they like with the fees for like raising money is one thing, and
Yep.
fees for sales another. I bet they got like double paid on some of that stuff, which is
Yes.
which is the
Well,
way
it's
the world.
part of what I wanted to mention is that for business owners, when you have an inbound offer and it's real, right? It has to be real. Then bankers will often discount the fee, and there's a discussion around that. It's not an easy discussion. But it is enormous value that you're bringing to the table, and the deal M&A advisor, investment banker really should accommodate their fees for that. So, but regardless, the better thing is not counting those pennies, but counting the outcome. So tell me, you drove a fantastic outcome. Talk me through that process.
I mean, the process is it's all consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And you have your day job, that we're presumably, and maybe not, like maybe you're the E-Myth, like you sit on top of the business and pull the strings. I was actually doing work from time to time and had to continue doing that work because people would have noticed if I had stopped.
Yep.
But then you've also got this other job, which is the diligence process, right? And my business partner Sheridan ran the vast majority of that, and I credit him. He did an amazing job. He managed internal legal, accounting, all that stuff. And so I mean, it really was like very much on him. But then also with the consultants and the expertise, but also more with the software platform, I had to run all the IP diligence process, right? And so I found myself where I'd be, they'd be like, hey, the guys in India want to jump on for a call at 3:30 in the morning, and like requests that I would normally tell people to go pound sand. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd be on a call from like 3:30 to 5, and then spend like the next 4 or 5 hours like going and getting all the to-do items done that call kicked up, then do my real job, and then like rinse and repeat. And so it's like you got to keep doing the job that you were doing and don't screw that up, right? Because if the numbers get weird or something like that, but then you've also got this additional workload. And it's really challenging because in a business of size, like I don't have all the answers, right? And you don't necessarily want knowledge throughout the organization as this process is taking place, just because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so the diligence process was a real, it was a very stressful time.
Let me ask on that. So one of the things that we like to coach on is having that financial lead on your team is part of the M&A process, takes so much off of you. And you said, obviously you had a partner doing that side, and then you've got your day job and trying to get through diligence all hours of the day. I think really business owners need to know that this is like all consuming. It is a really time consuming process. We've had certain founders say it's not hard, it's just a lot of work. Right. And you cannot let your day job suffer, because if performance goes down, that is ammunition for the other side to retrade your deal, to price down. And you definitely don't want to do that. So, obviously commend you for being able to juggle all of that work to get over the goal line. What was it like, when you go to sell? Tell me what the realizations were. You got the price you're looking for. What's it like at that moment, and then on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, especially with we had a bunch of crazy stuff like right up to the wire on the deal. But like when you finally do it, it's like taking a real heavy backpack off and setting it down, right? Because you've had this just like weight on you of like, hey, here's this great thing, but if this goes wrong, then this happens, or if this person doesn't like the way that this, there's so much kind of like on top of you. And again, having had 2 jobs for however many months the process went through, like the actual finishing the transaction, it was just like, okay, all right, that feels really good. I get to put that weight down.
Yep.
And then you've got to figure out like what's next. I mean, there's a whole big process after that, but just that getting through the process and finishing it, again, just feels like taking a tremendous weight off that you've been carrying for longer than you remember.
You carried that backpack, and having you alongside for somebody else who's doing that, really understanding diligence, particularly IP diligence, it's going to be very rare to have that kind of talent on an M&A team. So I know people are going to get a ton of value. Now you're on the other side. Tell me about like how your role changed and how you viewed kind of yourself. I love that comment of 16 hours a day, but now you don't necessarily worry. But there's a negative side too of like, who are you, and are people listening, to your to your guidance.
Right. Yeah. And so there's a couple dimensions of that. And one is like very much what you said with the guidance is I'm used to being in an environment where I'm the owner or one of the owners. And at the end of the day, I mean, again, we felt like we had a collaborative culture and wanted everybody's ideas. But like at the end of the day, like all cards on the table, it's like, okay, Dan feels strongly about this technical direction. Like, this is what we're going to do. Right. And then, to go from being the founder, the chief technology officer to the vice president of we needed to give this guy a title, is a very different role. It's a different vocation. Right.
Yep.
And it's something that I noticed, very much in the first acquisition we did, as well as the second one. Thankfully, with the second one, I kind of knew, hey, you're going to walk into a room, people, you have to justify what you like. You have to justify the direction that you think things should go in.
Mhm.
You're going to have to make those ideas stand on their own and potentially work against whatever bias or kind of preconceived notions that the acquirers had of no, this is the way we think the world works. I'm like, all right, well, I've been in this world and I think it works different, but if you're not willing to entertain that because your kind of script is very different, then that's whatever. And so that's one, just the professional role change is a very critical thing to recognize. Is it's going to require a different set of skills. You're in a different culture, so you got to figure that out. But then there's also, again, that identity stuff of no, I'm the founder, right? Being the founder of something sounds cooler than the vice president of who cares, right? And people, I don't know if I'd say justifiably, people really identify with their companies, especially, we ran it for almost 20 years, right? I had to change my email address for all my banks, all my everything. I had 20 years of my digital life, in this as the founder of this. And understanding that change in identity is a different dimension of that shift, but something that really has an impact, and it's something I noticed very much. Again, this first transaction when I was 23 or 24, I maybe didn't have sufficient maturity to have comported myself as well as I would have liked in all the situations I was presented with. And so it was handy to have been through that just to know okay, well, hey, here's what the arc looks like and here's how it's going to turn out. And, and in the first case, there was that even added dimension of, oh, you thought you made a lot of money, but no, you didn't.
Yes.
You're right. So it's not even oh, well, I might not be the founder anymore, but at least I got to keep a bunch of money. It's I'm not even the founder anymore. And I didn't get to keep any of the money. This is horrible.
No. All right. So you're on the other side, you're adapting to life over there, and you had a preview of what could happen because you went through it once before, which most people don't have that opportunity. Can you tell me what surprised you most, or lessons that you learned through not only these M&A transactions, but you've been part of multiple transactions as investors, advisors, right? You've seen a lot now.
Right. So I think it's really important to understand where do organizations get their value, right? How do they find value, right? And it's also, I think, important to recognize every organization is screwed up, but it's screwed up in a way that the stakeholders of that organization are comfortable with.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And it's screwed up. There's probably a more diplomatic way to explain that, but so it was important to understand what is the acquirer buying from you so that you can help kind of optimize along that. And again, smart bankers are going to do your basic accounting stuff of okay, well, is this professional services or can we characterize it as managed services? Because that's got a better multiple. Or can we characterize, right? I mean, and so there's an aspect of kind of financial storytelling. I think underlying that is, kind of the core thing of what are you bringing to the table and how do you make yourself the most attractive for the organization that you're talking to, right? So that they can see oh, with the assets that you guys have, if we combine that with our stuff, that's the chocolate and peanut butter kind of a situation that's better, that is going to allow you to command a better better multiples, better terms.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point, right? The bankers are going to try to frame it in a way that goes beyond financial multiples for that industry. But I think an exited founder really understands the nuances of how their industry works and have buyer relationships that frankly can see the inefficiencies on the other side and identifying the value that a buyer really wants and help accentuate that, help show why that is so valuable and how it's going to translate into value after the transaction. It's stuff that the bankers are not really worried about. So again, you're going to be super helpful in that framing for both buyer and seller. Frankly, that storytelling is critical to optimizing value. So again, what surprised you the most in your transactions?
And again, I think I would go back to every organization is messed up in a way that is most comfortable for the stakeholders, right?
Yep.
And that means that we had a set of decision making in our company of the sales folks and the engineers are the pointy end of our stick, right? And this is how we generate values. We get sales folks out, we support them so that they can go sign these big deals. And it's the consultants and the engineers, like those are the ones that are like bringing meat back and cooking it so that we can eat it, right? And and things like accounting, finance, HR, and whatnot were less important to us, right? And so we would make decisions and be like, I know the sales guy was supposed to get his expense report in 30 days, and we're at 96. Let's just take it easy. The guy's working on some real big stuff right now, right? And whereas like other organizations are going to have different priorities. We're going to say like, no, we've got audited financials, like accounting. This is a huge control, especially if you see PE-backed firms and things like that. Like they're going to have different ways that they understand that value is created for that organization, right? And so when you come over, it's easy to look around and be like, oh, well, look at them. They're stupid. They're doing this. They're doing that.
I understand.
So, like they're executing their playbook, and and candidly, they bought us.
Yeah.
So they got something figured out that we don't have figured out, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dan. You did kind of answer that, right? You're conforming to a new culture and a new way of doing it, whether you view it as inefficient or not prioritize the way you would have done it. That's going to be a surprise for a lot of people. I get it. Can we jump to the industry outlook, right? So cybersecurity, how are things changing? AI is an enormous topic. I think Stryker was actually hacked today and a lot of their software on Microsoft went down. So like, how are you viewing the industry today and what's making these companies viable?
So there's a lot of things going on, especially with AI these days. And like what we're seeing is with these LLMs and the agentic AI, you can now well, there's a couple of things. Like number one, you can create code way faster than you could before, which means you can make, and all of these models are trained on code that has vulnerabilities in it, right? So these models are understandably, like unless like really tightly constrained, they're going to create more vulnerabilities, right? And so a lot in my specific area, in the AppSec area, what you see is like the world is changing as you say, okay, we're making 10x the code that we used to make. We can't just try to run the old tools that we did or try to run the old process that we did 10 times as fast, right? We've got to figure out how to, incorporate these new technologies so that we can get more with automation, than we did before. And so that's really what we're moving into, is a world where on the attack side, a lot of that can be automated. On the defense side, some of the detection and defense stuff, can be augmented by this, but like the tooling that organizations use and the processes that they use to deploy this tooling, like a lot of the assumptions that went into that before are rapidly changing, right? And we'll see as that kind of like makes its way from kind of like the cloud AI first companies that are doing real comfortable with the generative code and stuff like that. That's going to work its way across the Fortune 500 and whatnot. And I think that's really forcing people to live in a world where it's like, okay, well, now I can automate things that I couldn't automate before. And so my budget for this automation, like all of a sudden, like what budget does it make sense to allocate? Because the people on the flip side of this, the attackers, are also like seeing the economics change, right? And I think that's going to be real tough for a lot of the legacy companies. And create some great opportunities. And I have the opportunity to work with a couple of firms doing interesting stuff in this space. That's going to be a real big change for cybersecurity, is like with these new capabilities and technologies, where do these lay out? And as the costs start to normalize or reflect actual cost, how is that suddenly going to make stuff snap back into into kind of older economics?
Dan, what I love about that answer is that I have the enjoyment of going 3 inches deep in 500 different industries, right? Because I talk to founders every day that are thinking about M&A, and now I get to bring somebody like you that can talk about those nuances of not only transactions, but what's driving value and how the world of cybersecurity is evolving with all the new tools. So inherently that perspective is going to help better storytelling, identifying where value lies, and creating better outcomes. Like, how do you think that you'll add the most value if we put you on an M&A team of selling another cybersecurity company?
I mean, I think I'd boil it down to the one thing that you talk about, I think is really important, is that storytelling, right? To understand like, hey, I've built this engine and we've got this technology, we've got these people, we've got these processes. Like, here's how if we add this to what you already have, right? And if we take what we have and sell it across your installed base, if we have like this technology combined with this capability that you have, like this is the vision of what we can do, right? And I think that's really important. Just as humans, I think storytelling is an important skill. And I think that, obviously financial discipline and whatnot, but I think when you want want to talk with like strategic buyers, you have to be able to present a vision of here's why if you bring us on board, we're going to be able to do amazing things together. And so that's one part, again, like kind of knowing the industry and then, been through a couple different types of transactions to see like how do these guys like make value in their organization? What are the things that these folks are concerned about? And let's make sure that we're telling a story that we both believe in.
And that comes from your experience of knowing the people in the companies in the industry at an operational level. Yeah, I mean, I know as a founder, you think you've got that story wrapped up in your own head, but it's from the perspective of what you've built, not what 10 different buyers, how they see the world. And I think having an exited founder on your team as that mentor, even pressure testing your existing storyline and helping the bankers adapt it, test it, it's so important in selling a company. It's just like when you're raising capital, how important kind of framing your story to a very specific investor makes so much sense. It sounded like you had another way you think you'd add value.
And there's also just kind of knowing what the process looks like and what to expect from a founder standpoint. And again, like our bankers were great. I think we certainly got a much better outcome from having worked with them. They don't need every deal to work, right? They're like time switching between this deal, your deal, and a number of other deals, right? And that's just understanding, right? How do these guys make money? They close deals, and so they would love to close yours, but like they can close somebody else's and also make money. And so I think something like that process for me, both through the original sale, the Wipro investment at Denim Group, the final sale to Coalfire, some other transactions along the way, I think it's important to understand the emotions that you're going to get dragged through.
Yep.
And I don't even necessarily want to characterize them as games, but just kind of the tactics that you're going to see along the way of, let's wait another month. We'll go another month's worth of numbers. Like, okay, great. And so just to work or to help people understand, like, this is kind of the way the process goes, and these are the slings and the arrows and the indignities that you suffer along the way, and like, don't take this personal. Like, this is the way that this game is played.
Yeah.
And if you can, an ability that I like to think that I have is that to like take a step back and like watch the kind of machinery of the deal go through and understand like, if this is this gear turning and that gear turns this gear and then this is going to happen, and to help provide some perspective to the founders going through it. Because again, as a founder, if it's your first big transaction, like you've seen one of these, like other people have seen more, and the buyer has probably seen more. And I think there's a lot of drive, like, oh no, I just want to get this done. Like, no, you can't just want to get this done, right? Like, you have to let this work out on the pace that it's going to work out. Because if you need to get it done, you're going to get a worse deal done, right? And just understanding some things like that, I think, is helpful.
The thing that really jumps out at me is what you pointed out that I've never really highlighted, is that when our exited founders join an M&A team, they're exclusive to that transaction. And so they are your mentor going forward until the end, and they're paid on your success. So everything counts. It only counts when the deal gets done, whereas all the other providers, from attorneys to accountants to bankers, are working on multiple deals. And they get paid on some and they don't get paid on others, and they got to get a certain take rate to be viable businesses. And I love what we're doing because we are walking in your shoes, and we live and die on getting that deal done. And that's why the conversion rate is so much higher. It's the dedication of people like you on the team. Dan, really appreciate you doing this. I think that for people listening, if this is something that, if you're in cybersecurity and you're thinking about M&A, or you've got an inbound offer, you got to get on the phone with somebody like Dan. So please check us out and look Dan up on our Exited Founder Marketplace. He's going to be in demand here, so sooner the better. Thank you, everyone. This has been great. Dan, really appreciate your time.
No, thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Exited Founder Podcast. For business owners who are looking to sell or want to ensure they're exit ready, our team is here to help you maximize your outcome. So connect with us at exitwise.com today.